Hey, hello, Earthlings. So, I don't normally do these, so I'm going to try and do a watch along. I've just seen a video pop up, a new video featuring Tobias Leenaert. So, I thought I would react to it without watching it, which I suppose is what you're supposed to do, isn't it? So, I've normally kind of done these a little bit, but I'm not sure if completely correctly with Andy before. And in fact, look at this. Yeah, so it's just me, um, and as I said, I'm going to watch along with this thing here, which is Tobias Leenaert. It's about 16 minutes long because the bit at the beginning. I don't know about the end, so we shall see on that. I've got a long history of interactions with Leenaert, usually not particularly friendly. Um, In fact, we did a debate together once, which was hosted by a group, and I ended up just quoting um, Tobias Leenaert from his own words, and he started swearing at me and everything, and he lost his temper. And so then he said to the group that he didn't want the debate put out, so they buckled under. I didn't actually hire a recording, so I put it out instead. Now, Tobias Leenaert has made a bit of a career in attacking veganism. He tends to reduce veganism to just a diet. Um, he also has these, excuse the ableist language, ideas about the crazy vegan, and he says a lot about communication, some of which I actually agree with him about the fact that our communication needs to be considered and good and this kind of stuff. So it's not as though I completely disagree with what he has to say. Yeah, first coughing fit of the night. So let's get on with this and see how it goes. I do have a video from 15, 16 years ago called Attacking Veganism One Talk at a Time. And that's when I first got to know what Tobias Leenaert was all about. He once came up with this idea that he wasn't a vegan, he was veganish. And I put a blog entry out, and I think it's still there, praising that. Because, see, the thing is, he calls himself the vegan strategist. Now, really, at best, he's the vegetarian tactician or something, because his position is not only not vegan, it's actually anti vegan. And so he shouldn't call himself vegan, in my view. Now, whether his view and mine can, work in tandem is an interesting thing to think about. But what his position isn't is vegan, but he always insists that it is. And as I said, he does reduce veganism to only a diet. I got a quote of him in that other video. Our movement is young, it's about food. And so this is a complete denial and distortion of the philosophy of veganism. Anyway, enough of this preamble. Let's get into this. As I said, I'm not used to doing these, so I guess you just switch them on and see what happens, and then stop and talk. So that's what I'll do. Okay. I need to do something else.
Hi, I'm Mariquita Solis with Climate Healers, And I'm excited because VCOP 21 is coming, making big change happen, April 26th and April 27th. So put that on your calendar and make sure to register. I'm here with Tobias Leenaert today, and he is one of our guest speakers. So I wanted to get to know Tobias a little bit better before I saw him at VCOP, and wanted you all to have a chance to get to know him to get better. So thanks for joining us, Tobias.
Glad to be here.
Well, I love your line of thinking, and I love your calm energy that you have. And I'm wondering, how did you come to get this calm energy and acceptance? Now, when I use the term acceptance, I'm not saying, that everything is wonderful, that the world is, that there's no awful things, or that you're not angry about anything, or you don't feel anger. I'm saying this place where you see that this is what it is. However, you're taking action. So you're not stuck. Where many people are stuck in anger and sadness where they can't move forward or they can't function. How did you attain this level in your life? I mean,
Well, before he answers that, it is true. Anger can be debilitating, so it's something that needs to be managed. And although the great animal rights philosopher Tom Reagan said that anger can be quite useful, can motivate. It's a question of how it's expressed, really. It's how we go about our job of talking to people, and I imagine there'll be a lot about communication in this. And as I said, some of it I'll agree with, and some of it I won't. So let's see how he gets on with that first question.
what kind of changes brought about this?
Yeah, yeah, it's a nice question. Thank you. Just let me preamble this by saying I'm not calm at all times. I have been shouting at hunters some weeks ago. Sometimes I lose my patience, but I think that in general I can bring up sort of compassionate attitude towards the people who are doing things that we don't like, people who eat meat, people who kill animals, people who rear animals on factory farms. And I think that the way I got to this attitude is a bit of pragmatism. Actually, pragmatism is my philosophy.
Yeah. So pragmatism is what he's going to talk about because that's his kind of position. Um, but again, it doesn't matter that you get angry. It's a question of how you channel that anger, and you don't have to lose your abolitionist position just because you don't want to be angry. That's a false premise in the first place.
And in this case, it means, well, being sad and being angry are not going to work. They're not going to help animals a lot. So if I want to help animals, I should not be sad and I should not be angry. Um, and of course, in many cases, we cannot change ourselves so easily, and we can know that we should be this or that, but we cannot necessarily be it. But in this case, it seems to work. So I tell myself, look, if I'm going to be angry and screaming here, it's not going to help. If I'm going to be sad and sit down and not do any action, it's not going to help. If I'm going to judge, it's probably not going to help animals. So I think one good tool or practice is to actually take the position of the animal. Like, let's just take one individual pig in a crate and imagine that you are her, and imagine that you're looking at you as a human, as an activist. Imagine that you're looking at the vegan movement, at the climate movement, and imagine that she has a good view of what works and what doesn't, and then you just imagine what she will be happy with and what she will despair about in terms of our actions. And I think she would despair, this pig in the crate, she would despair if she saw us raging and being angry without thought and judging everybody, and she would say like, oh my god, this is not going to get me out of here.
This is weird. First of all, there's one thing about empathizing with our fellow animals, but to actually assume that they're going to have a good idea about tactics and about what's going to work and what's not going to work. Now, that's something that we've got to work out. You know, the chances are that this pig is not going to know what's going to work, and also they're never going to be in a position where they can assess different types of activism anyway. So all of that is a little bit of a nonsense to me. This is something for us to work out. But this rage thing, you see, this is part of Leenaert's always talked about the crazy vegan stereotype. He came up with that along with Sebastian Joy, this crazy vegan stereotype, which basically meant that he said that what vegans do is you stand on the street and you're waving your arms about wildly and you're screaming and shouting at people. Now, it's undoubtedly true that that has happened, but I'm telling you now, I've been doing street work, vegan outreach since the 1980s, and I've never done that. And I don't see people doing that either. I mean, the last 10 years when I've been working with the Vegan Information Project, I can't remember a single instance. I mean, there might be an heated discussion that brews, but never this idea of screaming and shouting at people. That is almost like Leenaert is spreading an anti-vegan stereotype. And the thing is, he's not an activist. He hasn't spent years on the street. He doesn't know. He's just making this up, that there are these people who stand on the street screaming and shouting at people. I've very, very rarely, if ever, seen that in years and years and years of being on the street. And in the doubling experience, you know, we talk about a long time. We were doing 8-hour shifts in Temple Bar, and then 2 3-hour shifts on Westmoreland Street. We were out on the street 3 times a week, and it just doesn't happen, you know. So if you keep getting told that, you know, these people are crazy vegans, this is just a stereotype made up by Leenaert and Joy.
This is not going to help me. So that idea, just to be pragmatic in your feelings, in your outreach, in your communication, and focus always on what creates tangible change for animals rather than what makes us feel good or what makes us.
Well, that's a line that he uses a lot, and this is one where I agree with him. It's nothing to do with what makes us feel good. You know, he often says that, you know, people scream and shout because it makes them feel good, and I don't think that's true either. I don't think. I mean, I think people might get riled up and everything, but again, it's not about, oh, I feel good now, I'm glad I did it. And if people are like that, then I would agree with him that we need to look at our communication methods, because it's nothing to do with that. It's nothing to do with us. I mean, that's a kind of cliche in the movement, isn't it? You know, it's not about us. And in this sense, it isn't.
What gives us some good feeling, because that is a bit the problem or the issue here. Being angry sometimes feels very good. And that is, I think, misleading.
I don't agree with that. I don't think being angry makes you feel good. You know, it doesn't. It makes you irrational. It makes you probably do things that you shouldn't, and it makes you do things that you'll probably regret afterwards. I don't buy this stereotype that he creates, and he's created for almost 20 years, of these vegans who are out of control, but they feel good because they're angry. I don't buy that.
It feels good in 2 ways. It feels good in the sense that, like, if you rage, like I raged at the hunters, and it felt good, but it doesn't necessarily did any good. And also, if you then post about your anger on social media, or if you write some angry piece, you will often get from the vegan movement, you will often get very positive feedback about it. People will praise you for being so angry and for, like, telling them like it is, and maybe screaming, etc.
I think there's a confusion here. I don't think that people are posting about their anger. And I think that the praise is often about people's commitment or passion, maybe. And often people get praise because one of the most kind of common ways that you get praise as an activist on the street is because there's a lot of people who couldn't do it. And so they get praised for that. But I don't think it's praising their anger in any way. I think this is just feeding in to this anti-vegan stereotype yet again.
And that again is misleading, and it shouldn't guide our actions, because I don't think it's the best way to help the animals.
You're really on point there. A lot of times people will say, well, I put them in their place, right? And yesterday I was talking.
Okay, the only time I can think that that might arise is with this concept of holding people to account. Well, obviously there are ways and means of doing that. So the idea of holding people to account is not a bad one. It's a question of how it's done, like everything else, you know. But putting them in their place, is that just code for I educated them, I spoke to them, I had a conversation with them, you know? So why this negative? Why is it being framed? Why is activism being framed in this negative way? I'm putting them in their place. I love being angry. I'm getting load out of being angry. This seems off to me.
Talking to someone, Donna Sauerberger, and she was saying how even when people see facts, they hold on to it even more, right? So, I mean, they become more steadfast in their convictions. And I feel like that's applicable here. If we shut someone down, they're just going to hold on to that conviction even more. If we
Who's talking about shutting anyone down? We're talking about vegan education. Who's talking about shutting anyone down? Putting them in their place and shutting them down? Well, that's not vegan education. What's she talking about?
shame them or get angry at them or say, you don't care about, who are you? You don't care about animals. You don't care about this, or you don't care about that. I mean, that is so harsh. And
Well, if you're talking about the animal use that they're involved in, I mean, those things are implied. You don't care about them. You don't care about those, you are currently eating, for example. But again, it's to do with delivery and everything, and it's certainly not about any suggestion of shouting on the street, "You don't care, you don't care." Again, I've never seen that.
how can we change people with harshness?
Yeah, one way of saying this is saying you can't alienate people into joining your team. You know, they won't join your team if you just push them further and further away.
Who's talking about pushing people away? Vegan education is about having a conversation with people. See, the problem is he's never done this. He's never done vegan education. He just writes books and talks at conferences, and makes money out of pro veg. So nobody's talking about pushing people away. What's the point of doing that? If the idea is for you to act as an educator through discourse, talking, then you don't do any of this that they're talking about. Getting angry, putting people in their place, pushing people away, shutting them down. I mean, what are they talking about?
And I think that personal contact is actually maybe the best good personal contact, where you welcome other people into the fold and into your club and into your house or whatever. I mean, it's very intensive, and we cannot do that on a large scale easily, but probably like if you have like a little bit of a vegan commune or a vegan household, and some meat eater joins that somehow for a week or something, probably that's the best way for.
A vegan commune and a meat eater joins it for a week. What planet is this guy on? I don't know many vegan communes. Do you? But it would work like that. Interesting that he uses the phrase meat eater, because you see the point is really he's a vegetarian. He's not a vegan. He doesn't think like a vegan, and he doesn't talk like a vegan either, and he never has.
For them to change, see how you are, and that you're peaceful, and that you're happy with that diet, and then learn it's compassionate, and learn it's tasty, and so that's probably the best way to yeah, to make somebody tip over to us, rather than shaming them, guilting them.
Shaming, guilting. Again, if he went and did some street education with people involved with vegan education, it's not about shaming and guilting. It's about talking to them. Now, it is true that they might interpret what's going on as a defense mechanism, but that's not the intent, to shame. Being critical, thinking critically, making critical points, making morally consistent points. That isn't shaming. It's just making points in a conversation.
Even though those things may feel good at times, and even though maybe sometimes they work, but I would say as a general rule, we should be wary of them. Maybe some people are prone to feeling guilty, and with them you can like poke a bit at their guilt. Or maybe they will be more impressed when you're angry than when you're compassionate. But generally, as a rule, I would say, yeah, try compassion and try patience and try non-judgmental.
This is just recycling a stereotype about vegans that doesn't exist.
Attitudes first.
I think that too. It's important to be kind, and what you're saying with having those one-on-one interactions, I think is so important, because people see veganism as something that's just like, they don't even know what it is. It's some obscure thing that they're going to have to change their whole life. But like, if they're going with you and they're eating with you and seeing that, wait a minute, this isn't so hard, and look at what Tobias is eating, it actually tastes good. That's changing thoughts, and whether.
Yeah. Okay. Reduce things to food as usual.
I mean, this might be a slow process, but this is the slow and steady process that sticks, I think, because you are there to support the person that you actually have a relationship with. And that's a relationship that would be respectful, right? I mean, and this has a foundation of respect and friendship. And, I mean, what's a better foundation than that?
Yep. You see, this is the bit that I agree with, is the fact that people come up to us in Dublin and we respectfully talk to each other. And so it is like that, what you've just said. And that's again part of education. You don't shout, you don't position yourself as superior. You just talk to them about this philosophy of veganism. And that's all it is. It seems that this is what we've been presented with this video is a really skewed version of what vegans say to non-vegans out in the street or anywhere else with a look at it.
For change. Whereas if we're coming across someone we don't know and we expect them to change in 5 minutes and they don't even know who we are, it just seems highly illogical. But
expect them to change in 5 minutes. Who does that? All these weird points being made here just to have a go about something that neither of these people seem to have any experience with.
But yet that is what so many of us are demanding. And we feel bad about that. I might go home and say, well, I didn't change anybody today. Now I'm just a failure. I'm ashamed. I'm going to cry myself to sleep at night because these people didn't change. I talked to them, I screamed at them or talked to them for 15 minutes.
This is ridiculous. One of the main things that vegan educators talk about, people engaged with vegan education, is planting seeds. People walking away, you don't know what's going to happen after that. But of course, everybody's got experience of people coming back, going, "Oh, I'm vegan now." Families come back. We're vegan now. Whatever they mean by that, they're probably saying that they're plant-based by that. But we always stress the philosophy. So yeah, that's okay. Talking to people, but you don't expect them to kind of have some, kind of Damascus experience. Going back to Tom Reagan, most people are muddlers, and they muddle along, and we're part of that process of helping them muddle along. And again, the main thing we talk about is planting seeds, isn't it?
and they didn't change. And look what a bad person I am. And then that turns it around on me. And
you don't know if they didn't change. They might not have changed in 5 minutes and then walked away, but you don't know what the effect of your conversation was, or the bit of literature or whatever that you talked to them about and gave them. You've got no idea. So this idea that you would cry yourself to sleep and you're ashamed of yourself, it's just, again, points to the fact that you've never done it, have you?
then, there's so many vegans that are feeling this way and feeling sad about themselves. What would you say to those vegans?
I would say that it's a pretty high bar if you expect people to change very rapidly just because you gave them some facts. So I would say, on the one hand, diversify your tactics. Just don't give them just facts, but also take them out to dinner, cook together with them, go shopping with them, make sure that eat something tasty so that their reluctance or their aversion to listening to you is reduced.
I don't know how many times Tobias Leenaert has spoke to somebody on the street and then took them home to do some cooking together. It just comes over as they don't know what they're talking about. But of course, you give people facts, you give people the philosophy, and you let them go off and do with it what you want. You've planted your seeds, you've given the information, you've recommended some websites and everything. You've told them that you're going to be there the next week if they want to come back, and sometimes they do. So it's not about going, oh great, let's pack up and we'll go and cook a meal together now. They've never done this. That's the problem.
And I would also say that, like when you say, okay, I talked to this person, it didn't change, I didn't become vegan. I would suggest that we see people as some kind of containers or some bucket, if you want, and they are slowly being filled drop by drop with compassion drops, let's say. And at some point, the bucket will flow over. But at no point will you know how full the bucket is. You cannot look into it. But everything that you do, hopefully every fact you give them, every time you say something, you talk to them, or you help them watch a movie or eat with them, those are things that fill that bucket of compassion.
Yeah, well, that bit is right. But it's a slight contradiction to what you said before.
Maybe you can also poke holes in the bucket if you are too harsh with them. That's also possible. But the important thing is to realize that you're sowing seeds, you're dropping drops, and at some point the bucket is going to be full. And it's not just you that's filling their bucket, but it's all other people too. It's what they watch on the news. It's all kind of things, and we're not responsible for filling another person's bucket entirely. It is filled by the work of everybody, and by all the things that they encounter. So I wouldn't feel guilty about not seeing immediate results.
Well, I think that those are wise words. How would you, what do you think? I live close to a factory farm, and the workers I see going in the factory farm, and I don't even know what to think.
Yeah, here we go. Factory farms, scrap factory farms, welfare.
I mean, I know it's hard for me not to be angry at just at the initial, right? At the initial thing, at the base level. I'm angry at you for doing this. But if I really think about it, I have to, I have to explore what it's like for those people. And what would you say to someone that is really angry at the factory farm workers?
Yeah.
This focus on factory farm at the moment, they'll be talking about cruelty next. This is the problem. We have lost the ability in this movement to talk about animal rights. Virtually nobody talks about animal rights. They just talk about factory farming and cruelty and being an abuser and this kind of stuff. We have really lost the ability to make the case for animal rights, which is why Gary Francione is right that we don't have an animal rights movement, because nobody talks. If we look at the claims making of the movement, it's an animal welfare movement, because we make the same claims as the humane groups, the ISPCA in Ireland and the RSPCA in Britain, Our language is virtually the same. It's all about cruelty, and it's all focused on the worst of the worst, and the factory farms, the horror show. Whereas animal rights is about animal use in general, and making the case that we don't have the right to use other animals, that they are rights bearers, and our use of them are themselves rights violations, regardless of conditions. We've lost the ability to make this case.
Well, again, the anger is going to just alienate those people. It is from you if you express that anger. And if you don't express it and you just feel it, it's not going to help you either. It's just going to eat you inside, and it's not going to make you a better activist or more effective for animals. So it's useless. It's pretty much useless. I mean, it's maybe good to vent it now and then in sports or whatever, or hitting some ball or something like that. That is probably a good way to live it. But other than that, um, I would suggest that, like, yeah, if you want to engage with people like that, you try a compassionate and a curious attitude rather than a judgmental and angry one. And it's always good to like imagine that. So in there's a saying that I like. It sounds religious, but it doesn't necessarily need to be religious. But it is, there, but for the grace of God go I. There, but for the grace of God go I. That person could just as well have been me. If I had been raised in their circumstances, if I had had the information they had had, if I hadn't received the things I have received in my life, I could be done, and I could be doing the things that they did. There's nothing in me that I consciously willed differently than what they are. So that is a way to be compassionate, to just
Yeah, this is a bit where I agree with this, and but you see, this is sociology. We've got a psychology packed movement where people look at individuals and what they're doing. Whereas if you think about sociology and the structural aspects, which Leenaert was referring to there, alluding to at least, that is true, that we're born into a culture of speciesism. We're cultural speciesists. And, most people have that view. And we are some of the few that have managed to break away from that. So yeah, understanding that we're all socialized is a good way of dealing with. I mean, she was talking about feeling anger. Well, you can almost, if you want to, see the people who are using our fellow animals as victims of their culture. Now, you don't want to take that too far, but you could do it that way, and that helps with these kind of problems that they seem to be discussing.
understand that you could be them, and that they maybe cannot help so much about who they are and what they're doing. And they might need to just bring in some money, and they may not have a better job, and they may be poor, and they may be unskilled, etc., etc., etc. So I think that is a good place to start, to have compassion with them, and it's a good place to start a conversation from. Um, I think, and if you don't want to engage with these people, you don't have to at all, of course, but then at least it's also better to think like that, rather than blame them for what they're doing. In any case, if they
So where did that come from? Bullying them? Vegan education is not about bullying; it's about educating. So another pejorative word thrown in by the vegetarian tactician. Nobody's talking about bullying anybody.
didn't do that, somebody else would do it, etc. It's not a systemic solution. What we have to do is to change the system so that people are not called to work in such horrible conditions, doing such horrible things. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that awareness that they're trapped in the system too.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
They
So,
are. It's called cultural speciesism.
well, how do you ground yourself? After a long day of activism, what do you do to bring yourself down?
Um, well, what
I think I'd quibble with the premise of the thing. I don't think he has ever done a long day of activism. He's not an activist, and he doesn't show any signs of ever being an activist. So I don't like the question in the first place.
Relaxes me is, or what, yeah, in as far as I can be relaxed, because my head is always busy, but I would say I like cooking, I like watching TV series, and I like reading, and I do some sports. So it's nothing spectacular. It's the things that do some job relaxing most people. But I think it's mainly about yeah, quieting the thoughts. And if you have some things, some internal ideas, some lines, some quotes that you can live by, that you can internalize and that you can remember a lot, like the thing I just said there, but for the grace of God go I, or some techniques of like trying to put yourself in the other person's position, and see what their life looks like.
How about having a good understanding of the philosophy of veganism, eh? How about that?
From that perspective, those things I think help quiet my mind and avoid that I get angry or too judgmental. And there's things where I cannot bring up that attitude. Like I am, for instance, very sensitive to noise, and if there's like motorbikes racing past in my street or something, I really have a hard time being compassionate. So each of us has their own peeves that trigger them, their own triggers. And for me, I have been able to somehow avoid being triggered by people doing bad things to animals, although I can get angry, just like in the case of the hunters. But there's other things where I am unable to bring up that compassion as easily. For some reason, I don't know. I'm very sensitive to noise, I think, for instance. Yeah.
Well, life is
Yeah, well, that was a good non-answer, wasn't it?
a journey, and I love your curiosity on the journey. And it's good that you have your cooking and your sports and things yeah, to shift away. I mean, we all need that. So I love what you've been saying. And I want to make sure to invite everyone to VCOP 21. Again, making big change happen, April 26th and 20.
Okay, that looks like it's about the end of it. So let's drop that out. Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, it's not the worst thing I've ever heard from Leenaert, but he does just rehearse the same arguments over and over. You know, the vegan activists are a bit peculiar. They're crazy. You know, this ableist, crazy vegan stereotype that he invented. You know, and then the conversation. You know, bullying people. You know, holding them to account, although they didn't use that phrase. You know, putting them in their place. You know, these kind of things. It just seemed to betray to me that these people have not done activism, and certainly not as activism that I see. But I don't see that. And one of the things when Leenaert came to Dublin, he was challenged over and over again from the audience about the crazy vegan stereotype, because when you see him demonstrate it literally waving his arms around and saying is shouting and all this kind of stuff, right? And like none of us had seen it. Now, you know, where are you getting this from? And one person who was autistic asked for him to apologize for this ableist slur against vegans, and he refused. But you'd expect that. So anyway, that was an interesting experience. I think probably best if I just call it a day. So thanks for joining me. Let's hope the recording came out, and I'll see you again, people.